The most famous negotiation book of all time is called Getting to Yes and was written by Fisher, Urey, and Patton. This book provides a framework for the tactics that should be used in an integrative negotiation. These tactics are designed to move away from positional or distributive bargaining and towards an integrative approach. The four tactics are: 1. Separate the person from the problem. In, in addition, be soft on the person and hard on the problem. Although this sounds like we should just be nice to each other, what it really means is that we should try to depersonalize the problem in order to remove some of the emotional responses often present during distributive negotiation. So even if the current proposal is not to your liking, make sure that you don't attack, insult, blame, or threaten the other side. Instead, ask open ended questions, ask why, and engage in active listening to facilitate a free flow of information. 2. Focus on interests, not positions. As we know, interests are the reasons behind our positions. What we are trying to satisfy is our interest. Positions are only a means to an end. And once we understand this, we realize that there might be many different ways to achieving our interest. So we should be open-minded and creative. As a practical matter, there are usually many different interests associated with each issue discussed. So it is important to identifying them and prioritizing them. Remember that the key to creating value is to identify the different priorities that the two parties have over issues and interests. These differences allow them to make valuable trade-offs that are mutually beneficial. 3. Invent options for mutual gain. When each party has identified their respective issues and interests, it is possible to begin to look for solutions that will satisfy them. There are different ways to achieve possible solutions, but it usually begins with some brainstorming. That is, inventing options is basically a brainstorming task. After brainstorming, the two parties must evaluate the options. There are different ways to narrow down on an integrative outcome, and perhaps the best one is to use log rolling. Log rolling is possible when the two parties attach different priorities to different interests and issues, which may allow them to maximizing joint gain by finding trades that make them both better off. High-low trades. If this is not possible, another approach is to use what is called non-specific compensation. Non-specific compensation involves letting one party get their objectives satisfied, but then they have to pay off the other party for accommodating them. For example, two siblings both want to use the car, and they decide that one will get to use the car, but then that person will need to buy the other sibling a cup of coffee on their way back. The cup of coffee is the non-specific compensation. 4. Use objective criteria to evaluate options. One problem with the integrative solution is that at some point we must claim value. That is, as the two parties have worked together to grow the pie, to create value, at some point they have to sit down and actually make a deal. They have to split the pie, even if it's now a larger pie. So how do we avoid an integrated encounter suddenly becoming competitive in the end? Well, the key is to use objective criteria when evaluating the options generated. By using objective criteria, we will avoid a battle of the wills, a fight for the bigger share. An objective criterion can be precedent, traditions, customs, a legal requirement, etc. And it might actually be good for the two parties to decide what the criteria will be before they start inventing options for mutual gain. Anyway, these four tactics are considered to be the cornerstones for integrative negotiations. Separate the people from the problem and be soft on the people and hard on the problem. Focus on interests, not positions. Invent options for mutual gain, and use objective criteria to evaluate options. Perhaps I can just add a couple of more ideas. I want you to note that this approach cannot happen unless we have trust and many issues. Also, it is not wrong to be aggressive and tough during an integrative negotiation, as long as you are tough on the problem and not on the people. In addition, note that integrative negotiation is not about compromise. You are not compromising your interest. What you're doing is finding ways to satisfy everyone's interest. Also, just because you leave a negotiation happy and satisfied does not mean that you had an integrated negotiation. It only means that the deal is better than your reservation point. But you may still be leaving a lot of money on the table, value that could have been created if you and the other side had worked together in an integrated way.